They say that when you reach 65, the world expects you to fade into the background. To sit on the porch, rock in your chair, and let the tide of life wash over you. For a long time, I was content with that. I'm Arthur Pendleton. For 32 years, I taught woodshop at the local high school here in Blackwood, Vermont. I know how things are built, and more importantly, I know how things break. When my beautiful wife, Martha, passed away from cancer 5 years ago, a part of me went into the ground with her. But the part that stayed behind lived entirely for my daughter, Clara, and my 7-year-old granddaughter, Lily. Clara was my Spitfire. She inherited her mother's high, melodic laugh and my stubborn streak. She was a pediatric nurse, a woman who spent her days healing broken children. But she had one fatal flaw. She believed everyone had a soul as pure as her own. And then came Julian Vance. I remember the day she brought him to the house. He was 38, a high-end real estate developer from Boston. Spotless tailored suit, hair slicked back perfectly, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. When he shook my hand, his grip was a little too tight, the kind of grip a man gives when he's trying to prove he's the alpha in the room. "Arthur," he said, looking around my modest, cedar-planked home with a patronizing tilt of his head. "Clara talks about you constantly. It's charming, really. This whole, rustic lifestyle. I didn't like him. Call it a father's instinct. In my shop, if a piece of wood has dry rot, it might look fine on the surface, but the moment you put it under the saw, it crumbles into foul dust. Julian Vance was dry rot disguised as mahogany. But Clara was glowing. She was lonely after her first marriage ended in a quiet, mutual divorce, and Julian swept her off her feet. Within a year, they were married. They moved into a massive, sterile, glass and steel mansion Julian built on the cliffs overlooking the lake. A house with no warmth. A house that felt like a beautiful cage. As women, many of you watching this know the signs. You know the quiet, insidious way a control freak begins to isolate a woman. It doesn't start with a punch. It starts with a whisper. First, Julian convinced Clara to reduce her hours at the hospital. "You're burning yourself out, darling," he would say, wrapping an arm around her waist in front of me. "Let me take care of you." Then came the subtle digs at her appearance, disguised as compliments. "That dress is so charmingly retro, Clara, but maybe we should get you something more appropriate for the country club dinner tonight." But the boundary he crossed that set my blood on fire involved Lily. Lily was a sweet, sensitive child who loved drawing. She was the light of my life. Every Saturday, she would stay with me, and we'd bake her grandmother's famous cinnamon rolls. One Saturday, Julian came to pick her up. Lily didn't run to his car. She lagged behind, holding my hand tightly. "Come along, Lily," Julian said, idling his sleek black Mercedes in my driveway. "We're going to be late for your etiquette tutor." "She's 7, Julian," I said, my voice low and steady. "She doesn't need etiquette. She needs to play in the dirt." Julian smiled that cold, plastic smile. "With all due respect, Arthur, she is a Vance now. She represents my name. We have standards to maintain. Standards that go beyond, well, this." He waved his hand at my old flannel shirt. I watched them drive away, and for the first time, a cold knot formed in my stomach. I looked down at Lily's drawing left on my counter. It was a picture of their big glass house, but the windows were colored entirely in black. 2 years into the marriage, the illusion shattered completely. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. The Vermont wind was howling, stripping the last of the red maple leaves from the trees. My phone rang at 11:30 p.m. When I answered, all I heard was heavy, trembling breathing, followed by a choked sob. "Dad, can you come get me?" I didn't ask questions. I threw on my coat, grabbed my truck keys, and drove through the pouring rain to the glass house on the hill. When I arrived, Clara was standing at the edge of the driveway, drenched to the bone, holding a crying Lily in her arms. She didn't even have shoes on. I rushed out, wrapped my coat around them, and ushering them into the warm cab of my Ford F-150. As I pulled away, I looked up at the master bedroom window. Julian was standing there, a glass of scotch in his hand, watching us. He didn't chase after her. He didn't care. He thought he had already broken her. Back at my house, after I tucked Lily into Martha's old rocking chair with a cup of hot cocoa, Clara collapsed into my arms in the kitchen. She wept until her shoulders shook. "He took everything, Dad," she whispered, her voice raw. "He controlled the bank accounts. He told me I was crazy, that I was a bad mother. And tonight I found out about the money. He's been using his real estate firm to skim money from local charities, including the children's wing at my hospital. When I confronted him, when I told him I was taking Lily and leaving, he laughed at me." She pulled back her sleeve, and my heart stopped. There were dark, purple finger marks bruised deep into her delicate skin. "He told me if I went to the police, he would use his high-priced lawyers to label me an unfit, unstable mother. He said he'd take Lily away forever, and I'd never see her again. Dad, he has the judge in his pocket. They play golf together every Sunday. The police chief is his cousin. I'm trapped." I looked at the bruises on my daughter's arm. In that moment, the kindly old schoolteacher died. The gentle grandfather vanished. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. "You are not trapped, sweetheart," I told her, kissing her forehead. "You have me." Clara tried to do things the legal way. We went to the police, but as she feared, Chief Miller shrugged it off as a domestic dispute with two sides to the story. We went to family court for an emergency custody hearing. I sat in that courtroom, watching Julian Vance put on the performance of a lifetime. He wore a modest gray suit, looked the judge dead in the eye, and expressed deep, sorrowful concern for his wife's deteriorating mental health. He produced fabricated medical records suggesting Clara was addicted to prescription medication he had secretly slipped into her vanity or ordered under her name using his connections. The judge, a man named Warren Vance, adjacent by marriage and country club ties, looked down at Clara with pitying contempt. In light of the evidence, Judge Warren decreed, temporary full custody of Lily Vance is awarded to the father. The mother, Clara Vance, is granted supervised visitation for 2 hours every other weekend, conditional on a psychiatric evaluation. Lily screamed. She clung to Clara's neck, crying, "Mommy, don't let him take me. Please, Grandpa, help me." Julian stepped forward, untangled Lily's small hands from my daughter's dress, and gave me a look of pure triumph as he walked out of the courtroom. As he passed me, he leaned in and whispered, "You're an old man, Arthur. You're obsolete. Get out of my way." Clara fainted on the courthouse floor. That night, as my daughter slept under sedation in a hospital bed, I sat in my dark kitchen. I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I went down to my basement workshop. I turned on the single overhead bulb. I looked at my tools. My chisels, my saws, my heavy-duty clamps. Julian thought I was just an old man in a flannel shirt. He forgot that men of my generation know how to work with our hands. We know patience. We know that if you want to take down a massive, rotten structure, you don't hit it with a sledgehammer from the front. You undermine the foundation. Quietly. In the dark, every man has a weakness. A narcissist's weakness is his own arrogance. Julian believed he was untouchable because he controlled the local authorities. But he didn't control the federal government. And he didn't control the laws of physics. I spent the next 3 months doing my homework. I didn't look like a threat. To Julian and his associates, I was just a broken-hearted, elderly grandfather wandering around town. I started frequenting the local diner where Julian's construction foreman, a gruff man named Thomas McAllister, drank his coffee every morning at 5 a.m. Mac was a veteran, a man who valued honor, but he was trapped under Julian's thumb because of heavy medical debts for his ailing wife. I knew Mac. I had taught his son in school 15 years ago. One morning, I slid into the booth across from him. I didn't offer a bribe. I offered him a listening ear. Over 3 weeks of quiet conversations, Mac opened up. He hated Julian. He knew Julian was using substandard, dangerous materials in his luxury housing developments to pocket millions in kickbacks, falsifying safety inspections by bribing Judge Warren and Chief Miller. "He's building death traps, Arthur," Mac whispered, staring into his black coffee. "The concrete foundations on the new Lakeside Estate project? They're structurally compromised. One heavy winter freeze, one shift in the shoreline, and the whole thing could slide into the lake. But he's insured it for double its value." "Give me the ledger, Mac," I said softly. "Give me the real safety logs and the offshore bank routing numbers. I'll make sure your wife's medical bills are taken care of. Permanently." Mac looked at me, seeing something in my eyes that terrified him. He nodded. With the financial documents in hand, I had enough to ruin Julian financially, but that wasn't enough. A man like that can always bounce back with a good lawyer. He had taken my granddaughter. He had bruised my daughter. He needed to be erased. I used my old student network. In a small town, when you teach for 30 years, you've taught everyone, the mechanics, the bank tellers, the IT specialists. I approached a former student of mine, Marcus, who was now a high-level cybersecurity expert. Together, we installed a subtle, untraceable mirroring software on Julian's personal laptop during one of his country club dinners, using a keycard cloned by a sympathetic cleaning lady. Now I saw everything. Every text message. Every email to his mistresses. Every confirmation of the bribes he paid to Judge Warren. But I needed the perfect stage for the final act. It came in January. The great Vermont winter freeze. The temperature dropped to -15 degrees. The lake was frozen solid with 2 feet of ice. Julian was hosting his annual winter gala at his flagship lakeside mansion, the very house Mac told me was built on a crumbling foundation. All the town's elite would be there. The judge, the police chief, the wealthy investors. The day before the gala, I took my old truck and drove out to the lake. But I didn't go to the house. I went to the frozen water below the cliff where the mansion sat. In woodshop, we teach a concept called structural resonance. Every material has a breaking point. If you apply pressure to the exact right stress point, even the strongest beam will snap like a toothpick. Underneath the snow, the drainage pipes from Julian's mansion poured warm, chemical-laden wastewater directly into the rock face of the cliff, eroding the shale beneath the foundation. Julian had ignored the environmental codes to save $50,000. I spent 4 hours in the freezing cold, using a heavy-duty industrial ice drill and a specialized hydraulic jack I modified in my workshop. I didn't damage the house. I simply relieved the counterpressure of the ice shelf against the weakened cliffside. I loosened the cornerstone that held the illusion together. All it would take now was a single, metaphorical nudge. The night of January 14th was breathtakingly beautiful. The stars were like diamonds in a black velvet sky. The Vance mansion was ablaze with golden light. Hundreds of wealthy guests in tuxedos and evening gowns filled the grand ballroom, laughing, drinking champagne, completely oblivious to the frost outside. Julian stood at the center of the room, holding court. He looked smug, powerful, invincible. At 9 p.m., the double doors of the ballroom opened. The chatter died down slightly as I walked in. I wasn't wearing flannel. I was wearing my late father's tailored, midnight blue wool suit. It was immaculate. I walked with a cane, not because I needed it, but because inside that cane was a specialized digital drive. Julian saw me. His eyes narrowed, and a cruel, amused smile spread across his face. He excused himself from a group of investors and walked over to me, a glass of champagne in his hand. "Arthur," he said loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I didn't know we allowed the working class into these events. Have you come to beg for more visitation hours for your daughter? I told you she's indisposed." I didn't get angry. I smiled. A warm, grandfatherly smile. "I didn't come to beg, Julian," I said, my voice calm, carrying across the immediate circle. "I came to deliver a retirement present. To myself." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, remote presentation clicker. I pressed the button. Suddenly, the live jazz band stopped playing. The massive projector screens on the walls, which were supposed to be showing a promotional video for Julian's new real estate venture, flickered. Instead, a document appeared on the screens. It was a federal indictment wire transfer log. It showed Julian's name, side by side with Judge Warren's secret offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. It detailed exactly how much money had been stolen from the Blackwood Children's Hospital Fund. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop on the marble floor. "What is the meaning of this?" Judge Warren shouted from the VIP lounge, his face turning an ashen shade of white. Before Julian could react, I pressed the button again. The screens changed. Now, it was a high-definition video recording from the hidden camera in Julian's private office. The audio blasted through the ballroom's state-of-the-art sound system. It was Julian's voice, clear as a bell, speaking to Chief Miller. "I don't care if the foundation is cracked, Miller. Keep the inspectors away from the North Cliff. If that old bastard Arthur tries to cause trouble, find some drugs, plant them in his truck, and lock him away. I want that family crushed." The guests gasped. Women pulled their coats tighter around themselves, backing away from Julian as if he were covered in a plague. Chief Miller froze, his hand instinctively dropping to his empty holster. He knew it was over. Julian's face transformed from smug arrogance to pure, unadulterated rage. He dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor. "You old piece of trash!" he screamed, lunging at me. But I didn't flinch. I stood my ground. Before he could reach me, the heavy glass doors of the mansion were breached. Not by local police, but by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. 12 agents, armed and wearing jackets with FBI emblazoned in bold yellow letters, poured into the ballroom. I had sent the complete, unedited files to the Boston Federal Prosecutor's Office 3 days prior. Because Julian had moved the stolen charity money across state lines, it was a federal jurisdiction. His cousin, Chief Miller, had no power here. "Julian Vance," the lead agent announced, his voice echoing through the silent hall. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, embezzlement, racketeering, and conspiracy." Julian looked around wildly. He looked at the judge, who was already being handcuffed by another agent. He looked at his wealthy friends, who turned their backs on him. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of hatred and fear. "You ruined me," he hissed as the agents grabbed his arms and forced them behind his back. "You destroyed everything I built." I leaned in close, so only he could hear. "I didn't destroy anything, Julian," I whispered. "I just let the dry rot show. A man who builds his house on lies shouldn't be surprised when the roof falls in." As they led him away in handcuffs, the stress of the crowd, the heavy footfalls of the federal agents, and the vibrations of the sudden chaos triggered exactly what Mac had warned about. A deep, groaning sound echoed from beneath the floorboards. A massive crack spiderwebbed across the grand marble floor of the ballroom. The guests screamed and panicked, rushing for the exits. The north wing of the mansion, the illegal, unreinforced glass terrace, slowly, gracefully detached from the main structure and slid down the cliffside, smashing into 1,000 pieces on the frozen lake below. Julian's empire didn't just fall. It shattered. It has been 6 months since that cold January night. Julian Vance is currently serving a 25-year sentence in a federal maximum security prison in Pennsylvania. With his assets seized and his reputation utterly destroyed, his high-priced lawyers abandoned him. Judge Warren and Chief Miller are awaiting their own sentencing in a federal detention center. The corruption that choked our beautiful town has been thoroughly rooted out. But more importantly, custody of Lily was immediately restored to Clara. Today is a beautiful, warm July afternoon. The sun is shining through the canopy of the Vermont woods, casting long, golden shadows across my backyard. I'm sitting on the porch, watching them. Clara is back at the hospital full-time, her eyes bright and filled with the joy that Julian had tried so hard to steal from her. She's sitting at the picnic table, laughing that beautiful, high laugh that sounds just like her mother's. And Lily? Lily is sitting next to her, drawing a new picture. I walk over and look over her shoulder. This time, It's a picture of my cozy cedar-planked home. The windows are painted in bright, vibrant yellow, filled with sunshine. At the bottom of the page, she's drawn 3 people holding hands: her mommy, herself, and an old man in a flannel shirt. She looks up at me, her big, innocent eyes shining. "Grandpa, can we make cinnamon rolls tomorrow?" "We sure can, sweetheart," I say, pulling her into a tight hug. "We sure can." They think we are weak because we are old. They think we are helpless because we are quiet. But they forget that a mother's love is a fierce thing, and a grandfather's protection is absolute. I am Arthur Pendleton. I spent my life working with wood. I know how to mend what is broken, and I know exactly what to do with the trash. And as I sit here watching my family play in the sunshine, I know that the world is exactly as it should be. You know, as I sit here on this porch and watch the sky turn from gold to deep purple, I'm reminded of a simple truth. The world can be a dark place. There are people out there who look at gentleness and think it's a weakness. They look at a mother's kindness or an old man's silence, and they mistake it for permission to step on you. But they're wrong. True strength isn't loud. It doesn't wear a sharp suit, and it doesn't need to shout to be heard. True strength is the quiet, unbreakable iron that settles in your spine when someone you love is threatened. It's the patience to wait for the right moment, and the courage to do what needs to be done when that moment arrives. Julian thought he could rewrite our lives. He thought his money and his power made him the author of our destiny. But in the end, he was just another lesson in structural decay. Every story has an ending. For Julian, it was a cold cell and a shattered empire. For Clara and Lily, it's a fresh start, a home filled with laughter, and a future where they never have to look over their shoulders again. And for me? Well, my shop is open tomorrow morning. I've got a fresh block of cedar waiting on the workbench, and a granddaughter who wants to learn how to sand a rough edge until it's smooth. Life is funny like that. The storms come, they tear away the rotten branches, but the deep roots? They hold. They always hold. Before I let you go tonight, I want to thank you for sitting on the porch with me and listening. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the fierce love you hold for your own children and grandchildren, please take a moment to subscribe to Reality Shock Stories. Drop a comment below. I read every single one of them, and let me know where you're listening from tonight. Take care of yourselves, and more importantly, take care of each other. Pull your loved ones a little closer tonight. After all, family is the only thing that truly lasts. Until next time, I'm Arthur. Good night.